a little program we put together to get to know our makers and know more about them and promote them. So today we are talking to David Broadwell. So David, how are you?
I'm fine. How you guys doing?
Awesome. So how long have you been making custom pens?
18 years, over 18 years.
Boy, that's a long time.
Since 2001.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, what drew you to pens? What got you started?
They're tools. They're functional. They're like my knives. They're functional, but they can also be artistic. Way back in the 60s when I was in the 5th grade, I acquired a couple of Schaefer cartridge school pens, and really loved them. Yeah, part of the love was because we could have ink fights and I could sling ink from a distance, but you didn't have to up close and personal like with big sticks. But I enjoyed it. I drew all kinds of stuff, tanks and ships and airplanes with my pens, and really loved them. And then that just kind of simmered for years and years. Probably about 25 years ago, I acquired a pen made from one of the early kits. It was a twist ballpoint, but the guy that built it had used fossil walrus ivory for all the various segments, and I really loved it. Of course, it was made with fossil walrus ivory, and it started falling apart. But I used it for a long time. It's probably still around here in bits and pieces somewhere. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. I could do that. And then back in 2001, I just got I don't know how to describe it. It was almost an obsession to make pens. My ex-wife, my wife at that time, wanted some pens made and met a couple of guys who turned kit pens for a little business she had selling interesting stuff. And I finally told her, I says, they're not that hard. I can do that for you. If you just want writing instruments with wood, I can do that. And so for about 2 weeks, I thought about that. And then I realized I don't need kits. I'm a machinist. I have a machinist background. I've got tools. I can do all that other stuff that the kits have. And so that's kind of where it started. And I quickly went into wanting to make my own from scratch.
Okay, so in your mind, as you view it, we toss around the word custom pen. In your mind, how would you describe custom pen?
Well, first of all, I don't like the term custom pen. That is too broad. I can take a Mont Blanc and customize it, and then it's a custom pen. I can order, a Bexley or a Conway Stewart, or one time order a Conway Stewart and get it as a bespoke pen, and therefore it is a custom pen. I prefer the term handmade. Okay. And I'm very strict on what I believe is handmade as opposed to what some manufacturers call handmade. I've gone round and round on discussions with concerning some of the manufacturers. When they say handmade, yet they're using they have a shop full of CNC turning equipment, and that's not handmade. Sure. So what I think is handmade, and that's how we formed the bylaws within PAG, is it needs to be made on a manual lathe. It needs to be finished on a manual lathe and by hand buffing or hand sanding, various things like that. I've always bought my own fountain pen nibs, and the ballpoints and roller balls that I've made, I always buy refills because who wants to mess with all that gooey gel ink or pasty ink? But and the idea of making a feed, while I could do it, and a nib, I could do that. I'd have to buy welding equipment, and it would add ridiculous amounts of money to a handmade pen for me to make everything. So yeah, buying nib units. I've always used Bach up until now, and it's mainly because I've run out of my box. I agree with that. I think making your pen by hand involves a lot of handwork. yes, I do have electricity in my shop. You can see as I'm sitting in my shop, in my office, there's light in here. And yes, there's electricity that powered the batteries on my iPad.
Sure.
But there has to be handwork in it. If not, it's you're just a manufacturer.
Okay. I know you have a large body of work, but are there any techniques or skills that you think you've really taken to another level, or that makes your work unique from other makers or out there?
Well, for one thing, I do a lot of metal work. I was one of the first guys to use Damascus steel and Mocha Megani for trim components on my pens. And I knew how to work those because that's what I've used in my knives for years. And I carve both my knives and my pens. So there's a lot of that level of work on my pens. Being a former machinist has helped me understand things and how to make thread profiles that aren't just go down to Home Depot and buy a tap and die and shove coarse threads into something. Probably something that I do that few others do at this time is the level of handwork. For instance, my Trinity pens, I've made a lot of Trinities over the years and in various formats, from plastic to titanium. And in most of those cases, my Trinities, I go to my big belt grinder and I grind them. I've taken plastic and, acrylics and whatever and hard rubber and gone over and ground rounded triangular patterns on barrels and cabs. I don't know that anybody's doing that. I know some will use a milling machine to make faceted pens or multi-sided pens, which is fine. But I do a lot of that by hand. If I make a 3-sided pen or a 4-sided pen, I lay it out by hand and I grind it by hand. And then of course that means I have to hand sand and then polish by hand.
Right.
And that's probably one of the newest things that I've done is we've given it a name. It's Eleftheros, which is Greek for freedom. Why Greek? I don't know. I don't have any Greek ancestry. It just sounds cool. And I've named other knives and pens with Greek names. And the whole concept is it's a pen that's free from the confines of convention. That's kind of our tagline. And I know some people have seen a couple of my early ones, and they're curved. They're bent. One person described it as looking like a Japanese sword or tanto in its sheath because of the curve. And while a fair amount of it is still turned on a lathe, there's a lot of the exterior it starts on a lathe, and then I have to go over and hand grind it.
Sure.
And then hand sand it and blend the machine turned areas into the freehand ground areas. And that's they've been very well received. People are very excited about them. So those are the techniques that I do. I joke with people and say, there's a lot of talent out there, and there are a lot of good makers. We've got some great guys in PAG, and I just feel like I have to stay a couple of steps ahead of everybody.
Sure. The game has been raised.
The game has been raised. I didn't have much competition for a long time, and now there's good makers out there. So what can I do that they can't do?
I gotta ask you. As the Pen Artisan Guild has been built and people have subscribed to a truly handmade pen,
right?
What does the Guild brand or stamp offer to our consumers or the end user? What does seeing PAG mean to them?
Well, I think it needs to mean something to both pen makers and to the buying public in general. To pen makers, what I think it should mean is you will get out of PAG what you put into PAG. If you contribute, and there are a lot of guys that have very little experience, and then there are guys that have a lot of experience. And, I've got a lot to offer just because I've been at it for years. But you know what? I've learned things from guys that have been making pens for 3 or 4 years. So it's helpful. So if we put into it with no further expectations other than, this is my organization, I'm going to contribute to it. Even if I feel like I'm a total fool and don't know jack, I'm going to still get out there and say it. And we have our own, private discussion page that's just for PAG members. And so if you ask the dumb question, okay, it's really not that dumb. And if you do that, if our members will do that, they will receive much back. If all you're expecting is stuff, that's just like participation trophies. I make pens. I should be able to get all the information in the world without doing anything for it. And I don't believe in either one of those concepts. As far as the buying public, my hope is that we will continue to educate people as to why handmade pens at the level that PAG wants to make them by hand is worth their consideration. That it means truly by hand, not shoving parts into a CNC lathe and spitting them out like candy from a Pez dispenser. That's not handmade. But some people think it is because a big company has said we make the finest handmade pens in the world when it's really false advertising. I want them to see that. I want them to feel that they can contact a real artisan and craftsman about something, whereas when you contact Mont Blanc, you call a pen store. You call the Mont Blanc pen store or somebody like that and buy it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but people can order things from you and I, and people like that. I know that concept has been important in the custom knife field, and I've been involved with custom knives since 1981.
Part of what I'm hearing you say is working or designing something with a guild member is much more than just, like you say, go into the Mont Blanc store, you pick out your 149 and the color nib you want. It's more of an experience. It's a two-way street, a give and take. So
Absolutely.
It's not just the pen, it's the experience of purchasing the pen and being part of the design.
Right. When someone orders a knife, and I haven't taken knife orders in 3.5 years, but people would order a knife. I want something sort of like this one on your website, but I want this feature or I want that feature. I had a guy a number of years ago, an American of Japanese ancestry who lived in Hawaii. His name is Yamane. And he comes to me and he says, David, I want a knife that has these 3 styles and I need my name in it. Yamane in Japanese means base of the mountain or root of the mountain. And so I made him a knife and he's nuts about it. And that's what people can do with pens.
Okay.
And that's the experience.
I have one last question for you, and it's a very subjective and personal one.
Okay.
Out of your body of work, do you or can you select a favorite pen that you've made over the years?
No. I am very pleased with all of my Trinities. I've done others. Some that I'm really proud of are what I would call sole authorship. I did the carving and everything, all the metalwork. Others are when I collaborated with an engraver like Ray Cover, my friend Ray Cover. Probably one of the best ones was the first Poseidon pen. And there was a three-piece Nordic mythology set that had his version of images of Odin, Thor, and Loki on them. And, you know, those were a blast. We're working on one now that will have part of the painting of Guernica by Picasso.
Hmm.
And it's a custom order. And
Yeah.
so those kind of things are some of my favorites.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. And I'm just going to throw in my vote for your favorite pen would be the Poseidon.
Thank you.
That's as of now. So, you know, that may change in time.
Well, when you see Guernica, you may change your mind.
That's very possible. It's very possible. So I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, David Broadwell, pen artist, and we've been talking about the Pen Artisan Guild. Look forward to any comments, and please keep an eye out for our next video when we meet another maker. Have a good one.
Thank you.